since 2020 when we named you a rising leader. How much has changed with you personally and professionally?
Sure. Honestly, a lot has changed. When that article came out 6 years ago or so, I was still really just finding my footing as a leader. So now, 6 years later, I think the biggest thing that has changed is really like how I see my role. It's less about what I personally know and more about what I can bring and how I can bring the right people and the right thinking together to solve problems. More comfortable with ambiguity, more comfortable making decisions with imperfect data. And I think I hope I'm a much better listener than I was 6 years ago, as that was a personal goal of mine. The career has evolved too, but the personal growth is what I'm most proud of.
Very nice. And tell us a little bit about the change. Obviously, you're at Hilco Transport now. What is your role like as Director of Optimization?
Sure. So, Hilco is a bulk transportation company. We run east of the Mississippi across tanker, waste, and dump divisions. Tanker side covers propane, butane, ammonia, asphalt. So it's a pretty diverse operation. My background is really strictly in propane, so learning a lot on some of these other products. And really, I had a bit of a personal history with them before I even joined. I actually didn't know much about them, and we had one of those rough winters when I was at Superior where the demand was just outpacing everything and just couldn't find the hauling capacity. So I was calling every carrier that I could and hitting a lot of dead ends, and they were actually able to help us out. They were one of the only ones who were able to help us out and actually reposition some trucks for us. And that doesn't always happen a lot in those times of need. Most carriers at that point are just trying to protect what it already have. But it stuck with me. So when the opportunity to join them, I already knew what kind of company they were and was happy to join. The role itself it's kind of a created role, a brand new role for the company. It's Director of Optimization, which really covers both the improvements, process improvements, and data analytics. I think, in my opinion, transportation as an industry has kind of been historically run on a lot of experience and gut feel, and that experience has real value for sure. But when you layer real data and analytics on top of it, you start to see things that you just wouldn't see otherwise. And ultimately, right, it all comes back to the customer. If we can operate smarter internally, we show up better externally. Just more reliable, more flexibility across product lines and regions and consistency. Even in my interview 6 years ago, I said supply wasn't necessarily the biggest challenge. Transportation was the biggest challenge, getting the product to where you needed it. So customers in this space really need a partner they can count on. And at our scale, we can offer some things a smaller carrier can't. But because we're family owned, we still operate with that accountability and personal touch that just a big corporation often loses. So that's the combination that we're really selling, and my job is to support that and make sure the data and the processes can really back that up.
Just maybe looking a little more at your leadership qualities and what you did take away from the past few years of Superior. How are you putting those qualities to use right now?
Yeah, so like I said, just learning from that from this 11 years at Superior Plus. Really helped. But another really important thing I want to mention is that, and it's just, really important in my life is kind of mentorship. In that original article, I think I mentioned my mentor, Mark Scood, who really helped me grow. Since then, unfortunately, he has passed. So, could almost say my biggest growth as a leader it came from loss. He had a really deep impact on how I think about leadership, and losing him made me really reflect on what kind of leader I want to be. He really instilled in me that the best leaders lead through empowerment and accountability, and I've brought that through in my leadership style. You give the people autonomy to do their jobs, you trust them, but you hold them to a real standard. And I think that combination is what builds teams to actually perform. I used to think leadership was having the right answers, knowing everything in your scope. But I really think that through Mark that it's really helped me understand it's about just creating the right environment for the people around you, and bringing in the right people to kind of cover your shortfalls, and be not be afraid to admit your shortfalls, and knowing them is kind of one of the first things, right?
Did you work with him or report to him throughout your whole time there?
Yeah, he was the one who actually hired me. He was the VP of supply, so I worked with him my entire career there, and it was a mentorship, but it was also just we became great friends through those 11 years, right? Whether work related, non related, spent a lot of time together. So big loss for the industry, and a big loss for me personally and professionally.
Sure, sure. That's great. You touch on mentorship. It seems like it's more and more a topic in the industry, and we hear more about it from other leaders and from the young leaders in the industry too. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. And maybe sticking to the same topic, what advice would you give to young industry members wanting to continue to grow in this industry and become a leader?
Yeah, so sticking with that, I think finding a mentor, and take that relationship seriously. I can't overstate how much Mark in my corner shaped who I am as a leader and really as a person. And don't wait for someone to assign you one. Go find someone you respect, show up for them, be curious, invest in that relationship, and when the time comes, hopefully you can pay it forward, right? And that's kind of the next step that I'm really looking forward to, if I can become a mentor to somebody else. And another thing would be just change. You just have to get comfortable with it. Again, it's just so dynamic, and if you just wait for things to stabilize before you make a move, you're always going to be behind. So the people who thrive are the ones who learn into that, who lean into that uncertainty. But I think this younger group has some advantages, right? Growing up in a time where they're familiar with all the new technologies, they're familiar with the AIs and things like that, where they can really understand that a little bit better than some of the guys who've been doing in the industry for 40 years, and nothing like that was around, right? So really need to lean into that side too. I think that can be a benefit for the younger guys coming up, and for the companies that they're exploring it for.
When you're not working in the industry here, what do you like to do?
Yeah, so what do I like to do? I work from home sometimes, right? Well, all the time. So sometimes I kind of just walk past the office, and it's a Saturday or a Sunday, and I see the monitors, and I kind of just kind of jump in. But no, so like one of the things that has changed in the past 6 years personally is that I'm now married, and my wife has been a great support through the transitions and changes, and we like to go on hikes when the weather permits. I'm in Rochester, New York, so that hiking season might be a little bit short. I'd like to consider ourselves foodies. I love to cook, so doing a lot of that kind of things. And right now, interestingly, I'm trying to teach myself to learn piano. Something I always just kind of wanted to do. I just never did it. So now I'm just got a keyboard and seeing. And my goal is to be able to play something by next year at like Christmas time for my family, right? Things like that. So.
Very nice. You mentioned being a foodie and you like to cook. I mean, do you have a one particular dish that is your specialty that you like to make?
I feel like I can cook just about anything, but I do cook a lot of Korean food, being Korean. But my wife tells me one of her favorite things that I do is seared scallops. So that's a favorite in the house.